Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into one of the absolute most terrifying historical what-if scenarios of the Second World War. We're talking about the V3 Supergun. This was a weapon born out of sheer desperation and, honestly, wild engineering ambition. It was a massive, unprecedented cannon designed to fundamentally alter the course of the war.
Okay, let's dive into this. 600. I want you to keep that exact number in your head as we go through this. Had this massive project actually been completed, the Germans planned to fire 600 rounds every single hour. We are talking about an unrelenting, non-stop bombardment, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, raining down purely to break the spirit and the infrastructure of the enemy.
So, Part 1, the threat to London, striking the British capital from France.
Now, you might be wondering about the strategic objective here. It wasn't just random, general destruction. The V3 was built just across the English Channel in Pas-de-Calais, France, specifically to bypass the need for bomber aircraft entirely. The goal was to strike directly into the heart of the British capital from over 100 miles away. And the calculated nature of this thing? It's chilling. Because of its massive size, you couldn't just aim it like normal artillery. Instead, it was permanently embedded into the earth at a fixed 50-degree angle, pointed directly at Westminster Bridge in central London.
To really grasp how serious this threat was, we just have to look at the Allied reaction. When the true nature of this project was finally uncovered, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill didn't mince words at all. He literally called it the most devastating attack of all. Under that kind of relentless, constant shelling, London's daily life, and more importantly, its critical war manufacturing, would have ground to an absolute halt.
Moving on to Part 2, a 460-foot multi-chamber cannon. Engineering the impossible.
Listen, to shoot a heavy projectile over 100 miles requires a staggering mechanical solution. Standard cannons simply couldn't generate the pressure needed without literally blowing themselves apart. So, the German solution? A cannon an incredible 460 feet long. This length gave the high-pressure gases enough time to accelerate the shell to extreme speeds. When you break down the construction, it's like a giant puzzle. The barrel was built in stacked segments, bolted together with these massive 16-bolt flanges. Crucially, it was a smoothbore barrel, meaning no internal rifling. This reduced friction and allowed the shell to eventually reach up to 4 times the speed of sound. Along the sides were 32 pairs of auxiliary chambers holding solid fuel, while that main breech at the bottom was actually just adapted from a standard German field howitzer.
And this brilliantly illustrates Part 3, the sabotage shell solution, aerodynamics and ignition.
So, because the barrel had no rifling to spin and stabilize the shell, they had to design a highly aerodynamic, finned projectile. But here's the catch. Fins don't fit snugly inside a wide, smooth barrel, which means explosive gases would just leak right around it. To solve this, they created a unique cast iron cage called a sabot to hold the shell perfectly center as it traveled. The firing sequence itself is this elegant display of high-speed physics. Step 1. The striker hits the primer, igniting the main charge at the bottom. Step 2. Those expanding gases push into a piston behind the shell, creating a perfect, airtight seal against the barrel walls. Step 3. The shell rockets upward. Step 4. As it passes those auxiliary chambers we mentioned, the hot, trailing gases sequentially ignite the 32 pairs of solid fuel blocks. It's basically a continuous speed boost all the way up that 460-foot shaft. Finally, Step 5. As soon as the shell blasts out of the muzzle, the piston in that cast iron sabot cage immediately fall away, releasing the aerodynamic round to fly silently toward London.
Which brings us to Part 4, inside Momoya Cave Fortress, the 350-foot deep underground city. Right, so you obviously can't just put a 460-foot gun out in an open field. It would be instantly destroyed by bombers. The logistical nightmare of housing and firing these things required taking everything deep underground. The Mimoyex complex dropped an astonishing 350 feet below the surface. The sheer scale of it is mind-blowing. It featured 5 massive angled tunnels called drifts, and each drift stacked 5 cannons on top of each other. Up top, the surface was heavily armored with 18-foot thick concrete pads and massive 7.9-inch steel plates with holes cut out just for the shells to exit. Deep inside, it was basically an underground city. It had its own railway station and 13 interconnected galleries for moving ammunition, all meant to be manned by a small army of over 1,000 personnel.
But when we compare the terrifying theoretical output with the harsh reality, you see a massive gap. In theory, they plan for a 5-minute firing pace. That's 14,400 rounds a day, which would need over 38,000 fuel cylinders every single hour. Insane, right? Realistically, though, dealing with toxic fumes and manual reloading, a 30-minute pace was way more likely. Yet even at that reduced pace, it was a total logistical nightmare. It still required crews to cycle 3,200 fuel cylinders an hour just to keep the guns firing. And the human cost to maintain even that realistic pace was gruesome. Imagine 320 hot, gas-filled chambers that had to be manually reloaded in minutes. After firing, crews literally had to scramble up steep stairs through lingering toxic fumes, manually unscrew hundreds of scalding hot auxiliary breaches, and shove in fresh solid fuel blocks, all while just hoping a stray ember didn't ignite the fuel right in their faces. And they had to do this over and over, all day.
Let's get into Part 5, the downfall of the V3, physics, bombs, and demolition. Ultimately, this terrifying superweapon clashed hard with the realities of war and relentless Allied scrutiny, meaning it never actually reached its objective. Let's trace how fast it fell apart. Just 2 months into construction, in November 1943, the site was bombed, forcing them to scale down from 50 guns to 15. The fatal blow, though, came in July 1944. The Royal Air Force dropped these massive 12,000-pound Tallboy earthquake bombs, which utterly collapsed the lower levels of the complex. By September, advancing Canadian forces captured the empty, abandoned site. And finally, in 1945, Churchill knew they couldn't leave those intact tunnels as a risk, so he ordered the Royal Engineers to completely seal the complex using tons of captured explosives.
Actually, scratch that. It wasn't just the bombs that doomed it. The engineering itself really fell short. The big promise was this groundbreaking velocity of 1,500 meters per second. The reality, the gun never even reached its target speed. The theoretical physics just required way more development time than the war allowed. They did briefly try out a much shorter, modified version of the gun in combat at Lampadin, shelling Luxembourg late in 1944, but firing a smaller explosive charge against unarmored targets proved highly ineffective, and the whole thing was quickly abandoned.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is Part 6, the V3's modern legacy, from the bunker to the modern battlefield. Because you see, the story of the V3 doesn't actually end in those collapsed tunnels in France. It left a massive, lasting impact on modern military technology. That legacy is the APFSD. Yeah, it's a mouthful, armor-piercing, fin-stabilized, discarding sabot. Remember the V3's elegant solution to fire a fin shell out of a smooth-bore barrel using an iron cage that falls away? That exact same aerodynamic principle directly influenced the primary armor-piercing rounds used by virtually every main battle tank around the world today. So the V3 cannon itself was a failure, but its ammunition design absolutely revolutionized modern tank warfare. And here's the crazy part. You can literally step right into this history today. Back in 1969, a local farmer named Marie-Madeleine Vasseur actually reopened one of the tunnel entrances. Today, the whole site operates as a nonprofit museum. If you head over there in the summer, you can walk through the original underground railway tunnel, explore the galleries, and literally peer down into those massive gun drifts. Most importantly, though, the site now serves as a place of reflection. It features monuments honoring both the forced laborers who tragically died building the complex and the brave Allied bomber crews who gave their lives to destroy it. Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. What if? If the engineers had actually solved the physics in time, and if those bombers hadn't found Mimouiec and the V3 had actually achieved its 24/7 bombardment of London, how would it have changed the outcome of the Western Front? Would that relentless psychological and structural damage have forced a totally different end to the war? It is a terrifying historical what-if that really reminds us how incredibly thin the line between victory and catastrophic defeat can sometimes be. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and we'll see you in the next explainer.